see you guys in the dark.
I'm a 26-year-old male. This incident occurred a week ago in Cologne. I was invited by my friend and a business colleague to go there. At 8 o'clock in the evening, I was on my way home. I sat down at the bus stop to wait. I was alone there except for a girl sitting on the other side of the bus stop. It was almost empty. At first, I didn't pay any attention to her and was busy texting my friends. However, several minutes had passed, and the bus still did not arrive. During this time, I put my phone aside, and that's when I began to notice some obvious oddities, at the point of feeling very uncomfortable. The girl looked to be about 30 years old. She was thin, dressed in black, with long black boots, with a hat lying next to her seat. What confused me was her unnaturally and unhealthy pale skin, especially on her face, and her bags under her eyes were outlined in black. Nothing unusual. I've seen many people with informal styles and appearances, but her eyes were so empty, lifeless. They were glossy. However, what really scared me was the way that she looked at me, with obvious aggression, predatory, like a python looking at a mouse. At the same time, she smiled weirdly and disgustingly, sometimes licking her lips and quietly humming some melody. This had went on for more than 10 minutes, and I mean non-stop. Never in my life have I felt such confusion and discomfort as I did at that very moment. I just wanted to run away, but at the same time, I didn't want to look like an idiot, especially since I had been waiting so long for the bus. I understand how silly this sounds from the outside, but I simply cannot describe how repulsive and frightening she looked at me. Her face was so scary at that very moment. I just knew that something was wrong, and my instincts and intuition were screaming that this was not normal, and that this should not be happening. In addition to what I saw, I just felt in my gut that this would not lead to anything good. Her eye contact was unrelenting. She was still looking at me, and I was trying to look away, at my watch or at my phone. I felt very uncomfortable, but I tried to be friendly. I greeted her, waved awkwardly, but she continued to stare silently. Then the situation began to deteriorate rapidly, and her behavior became more hostile, more passive aggressive. She then moved to open aggression. She began to breathe heavily, grind her teeth, and squeak. Then my patience snapped. I stood up and shouted at her, "Will you please stop?" I kept my distance, and I didn't go near her, because I realized that she was probably on drugs or had mental health issues. At that moment she seemed to fall silent, and spoke for the very first time, muttering, "I'm sorry." At that moment I felt a little calmer, and she even stopped staring at me. I texted my friends that I was still out, and would be a little bit late getting home, and just then my heart skipped a beat. She let out a loud cry, much like a scream. The girl jumped up from her seat and started coming towards me, muttering some weird stuff in German. I was confused, and gradually, step by step, prepared to retreat, until the girl suddenly started chasing me and rushing towards me. This crazy girl clung to me with her long, sharp nails, drawing blood, and tried biting me several times, tearing my shirt at the shoulders. I had no choice but to hit her between the ears, as it was a matter of my safety, health, and possibly even my life. After that, I pushed her aside, and in a few moments managed to run to a small shop where there were many people. I briefly told them what had happened to me, and they told me to call 110, which I did. My scratches on my arm were successfully treated by a local worker, for which I am very grateful for him. Later on, I went to the police station. I showed them my injuries and my scars on my arm. I told them about the incident. They suggested that I file a report in order to bring the attacker to justice. However, I refused to do so because I was due to return to my homeland in 3 days, and I simply did not have time for all of that red tape. I still don't know who this lunatic was or what motivated her. But there's my lesson. Never underestimate the number of crazy people around you, especially when it comes to big cities, and if you are alone. I am a grown man, and I was able to step up for myself. But imagine if a child or an elderly person who had found themselves in the same situation. I'm afraid to imagine what would have happened next. This is not the worst or the scariest thing that could have happened in my life, but this is so damn crazy and frightening, it's absurd. Now, because of this, I say fuck public transport. After this, I will always use a taxi when I'm abroad again. When I was a teenager in the late 90s, I briefly worked at a stupid goth boutique in a big US city. Not like a hot topic, but it was way more expensive and straightforward. goth postcard punk type thing. Most of the staff were young, silly, cliche snobs. The customers ranged from perverted to touristy to wannabe rock stars riding the first tech bubble. The boss was this raging coke meth head who would flip from glassy eyed smile, who would adore you, to lying manic aggressive paranoid monster. The boss, for no reason, would suspect random staff of conspiring against him. He regularly fired people on a whim, seemingly inspired by paranoid fantasies. Later on, I found out that his mom was funding the whole operation, but I never personally had an issue with the boss. I was good with customers, got along with staff, and generally kept my head down and sold lots of ugly pleather crap or whatever I had. One day I was taking the bus from shady crap town to goth hellhole for my shift. There was a big stretch during which the bus didn't stop. Sure, it was the express stretch, lots of boarded up buildings and sketchy strip malls, then a bunch of overpasses. It looked pretty much all gray, abandoned, and full of garbage. You know the look. Since it was a long ass bus ride, I zoned out, staring out the window, just trying to make up for time. There was maybe 8 people on that bus with me. I was sitting in the very back corner of the bus, basically the farthest away you can get from the doors or anywhere to run. Most other people were near the front. Suddenly I got that feeling. The whole being watched and hairs on the back of my neck standing up thing. Something was wrong. I glanced around the uncommonly quiet bus, and there was a guy pacing up and down the aisle. He looked disheveled, underweight, wild eyes, and agitated, and had a huge kitchen knife in his hand, bigger than the biggest you usually see in a set. I don't know how long he'd been on the bus, or how long he'd been doing his knife guy thing, but he was really into it now. This is the part where I tell you about the shit that I've seen in the city. I've seen worse and weirder things, but this seemed different right away. He wasn't an unhinged tragedy who maybe was having a breakdown. He straight up looked like he was actually trying to decide who to stab. Then the guy looks directly at me. I'm all alone in the back. He's still doing the psycho power scene. Knife stands, and without breaking eye contact, starts walking towards me very deliberately. I felt nothing but incredibly calm, staring at him and thinking, well, guess maybe I'm going to die now. It was like I rocketed through the stages of grief straight to acceptance. Totally one of those you never know what you'll do till you're in it moments. Apparently, my will to live decided to immediately space out. He picked up the pace with this big fucking kitchen knife, but somehow everything seemed to be slowing down. Not only in time, but it also felt like it physically started slowing down. Then I realized that is it. The bus had slowed, then it stopped. Even though there's no bus stop and nobody pulled the cord, the bus pulls over and the doors open. The bus doesn't move. The driver doesn't move at all. Nobody moves. The knife guy stops. Then he goes to look at the open door. He looks directly at me, looks back at the door, then back at me, drops his arm, and casually gets off the bus. The doors close. The bus sits still for a while. The guy crosses the street and throws the knife in the trash can, runs off. Cops pull up. I still have no idea how or when this all had happened. Who knew what and when? But the bus driver obviously had done his best. And it turned out all right. I decided to violate my never snitch rule and go to the station to give a statement. I'm totally numb. The cop is nice to me, gives me a ride to work so I won't be late. When I walk in, my boss is there, and he's in a mood. The shop is busy, and he's flitting about, getting in everybody's way, fussing about everything. Something about the loud, garish, stupid environment with the stupid music, which was the Nightmare Before Christmas soundtrack. And the asshole customers, the snobby staff, and cuckoo coke boss getting in everybody's face makes me break. I start shaking and go to the back to clock in. Now I'm starting to realize what actually just happened. The boss follows me into the back and starts in his syrupy, phony, how's it going, girlfriend voice, with his plastered on smile. I'm obviously not okay. I start spilling on about how the cops dropped me off. I thought I was going to die, and he had a huge knife. All that. I'm struggling not to cry. Boss just stares at me. Then he goes, I don't have time for this shit. And then he goes back to the sales floor. That night I get drunk. And the next day was a no call, no show on purpose. And I got fired. So back in high school, I was one of those 14-year-old goth kids. I wore those black pants and chains with zippers, pockets everywhere. I still kind of do. It got me the occasional weird attention, but I just shrugged it off. I had the study hall at my last class before class let out for the day. I'd usually be in the back, out of view of the librarian, feet up on the table, headphones on my head, and a book in my lap. I don't really know when this started because one day I went into the front of my backpack, only to find notes, like 10 of them folded up into weird triangles with the first initial on them. I opened them all up to find out that all of them were written in blood. They were all attempts at poetry. They were very horrible at that. Like, what flowers would my maiden love, so that I might trace your flesh with their petals? Would only a black rose work, because it'll share the color of our hearts? Maybe it's thorns that may prick you, and may suckle the blood from your fingers, and so we can be one. There were no markings of who it was from, and I couldn't figure out when they would have gotten there. So by then, when I was at the library, I started sitting near the middle of where everyone else could see me, with my feet on my backpack, and I could never get into my books because I kept looking around. One day after school, I didn't have any more notes for a week. I was thinking, sweet, it's over. Until I was walking home a few days later. I had my headphones on like usual, so I couldn't hear anything around me. Out of nowhere, I felt like I was being watched and followed. I turned off my headphones to try to listen, to see if anyone was crouching near me. Nope. I did a casual glance around and didn't see anyone. I started fast walking home and instantly ran up to my room and looked around out the window. I live on a two-story apartment complex. A few days later, I was outside watching my nephew play with the complex kids. One of the younger girls, Danielle, came over and sat next to me on the granite steps in front of our front door. I was drawing at the time, and she was watching me out of the blue. She asked, "So, who is that boy that keeps coming here? Is he your boyfriend?" She's like 8 or 9 at the time. I asked her, "What boy?" "The boy with all black. He dresses like you do." My face drained of all color. I asked her, "Have you seen him at all today?" "Yeah, he once came and asked if you lived here." "I told him that you did. I thought he was your friend, 'cause you said all the stuff you wear." I asked her, "Is he here now?" By then my voice is panicky, and she gets a little worried. "I don't know. Last I saw, he was messing with Bill's garage. That's our maintenance guy. He hasn't been around for a month because everything's been okay recently." I called my nephew inside with me. He was annoyed, but I sat him up with the Xbox, and he calmed down after that. I told my parents and showed them the letters. They called the cops. We contacted Bill to check out his garage. Sure enough, it was broken into, and it looked like someone was hiding out in there, but they were gone now. No more letters after that. No more strange sensations while walking home, and Danielle didn't see him again. I thank that little nosy brat so much now. But somehow I kept getting those creepy emails, similar writings to the letters from different emails each time. I've changed mine multiple times. It'll be a few months before they start up once again. It's been 10 years, and I still get one every 6 months or so. I've moved to a different town, so I don't know if he is here as well. That's why there's throwaways.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.